Well, welcome back to 5 Minutes of Theology with Dr. Dan, and not Pastor Dan, but Dr. Dan is still here, and nothing can stop Dr. Dan, so we're still going to learn today. What do you got from this weekend's passage?
Well, one of the things that I thought about in this passage was the idea of Christ being preached. It's the when point that in Daniel's message over the weekend. But whether people are focused in the right direction in regard to motives, Paul says that the most important thing is that Christ is preached. So he uses several different Greek words there. I won't talk about what those words are, but one of them is the word that's usually used to refer to the preaching of the gospel. The second one is a word that kind of focuses on the proclamation aspect of that. So the end result is, I don't think anything any different. So he's just using different words to talk about the same thing, that Christ is proclaimed, Christ is preached. And then he uses, when he gets to the point of saying, yeah, here it is. Here is the most important thing that we need to think about in this regard, is even though people are preaching with wrong motives or with right motives, the important thing is that Christ is magnified. Christ is exalted. That word has the word mega on the front of it. And it really emphasizes, I think, that this is not just a throwaway idea for Paul. He actually has mentioned it 3 times in the course of a few verses. The important thing is that the name of Christ, that Christ is exalted, not just a little bit, not just if we think about it, but this idea that Christ is proclaimed. And I don't think anything any different than he is talking about in relation to the gospel. When he talks about the preaching of Christ, the exalting magnification of Christ, it is the idea that the gospel of Jesus Christ is being preached and proclaimed, and people are being changed because of that.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of their content that's wrong, but it's just their heart and their attitude. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So Paul speaks of other opponents throughout his writings in very different terms than what he talks about this. Even in this book, he talks about opponents in the last few verses of this chapter, the last few verses of chapter 1, and he talks about their destruction from God. So those are different opponents than these people who are preaching with wrong motives. And it's different from the people that he's mentioning in chapter 3, the Judaizers, we call them sometimes. He actually calls them dogs. So he doesn't think the same way about these. These are not the opponents that he speaks about in Galatians. But these are people who are preaching Christ. They're preaching the message. They're preaching the gospel. But their motives are wrong. And he says, that's... Yeah, he might talk about that in other terms, but in regard to this, where the gospel is the focus throughout this chapter, what he says in this context is what's important is that Christ is magnified, Christ is exalted, and the gospel is preached.
Yeah, keep the main thing the main thing.
Keep the main thing the main thing.
Even if he doesn't know him. Even if their motives are kind of wrong, the gospel message is good and it's clear and it's changing lives, and so that's a win.
Yes, and in Daniel's words, that's the win.
That's the win.
Yeah.
Love it. Right on.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we have service this weekend. Pastor David Reynolds will be preaching on Philippians 1:19 through 26, so we hope to see you guys there.